Today we're going to look at the long-term benefits of positivity and also explore something called toxic positivity. Because even though positivity has been shown to be incredibly beneficial, not only to the person who's applying those positive activities, but also to those around them. I'm going to start with a story based on a research study called the Nun Study. And it's a long-term study, been going on for many years. And in 1986, the University of Kentucky, which was led by David Snowden, they approached the school sisters of Notre Dame, who agreed to donate their brains for a research study on aging and the effects of Alzheimer's. It was only open to those who were aged 75 years and older, and brain donation was agreed whether or not the sister had dementia. For 15 years, the nuns' genes were analysed. They were tested on a regular basis for physical and mental exercises, their strength, their ability to balance, the words they could remember from flashcards, along with some counting exercises. The researchers also read the autobiographical essays that the nuns wrote when they entered the convent in their 20s, when they took their vows. And these were analysed in really great detail. Those who had expressed more positive emotions and recounted positive stories from their early childhood in their autobiographies lived significantly longer than those expressing fewer positive emotions in their stories. But what was more remarkable is when they analysed the brains of the nuns after they died, some of the brains were showing quite significant markers of Alzheimer's, yet there was no visible signs of Alzheimer's disease when they were alive. Those who were showing signs of Alzheimer's in their life, their brains were not as degenerated as some of the other sisters who didn't show any signs at all. Other important findings were the nuns' level of education and their attitudes to life, positive or negative, were contributing factors to avoiding or developing Alzheimer's. This study not only highlights the effects of a positive outlook on mental health, well-being, Alzheimer's and aging, but there's a lot to learn on how we can use these and perhaps even explore a formula for happiness, a formula for good living. And this is the basis of what we're going to discuss today. So in this session, we're going to look at something called toxic positivity, because we hear lots about positivity and then this phrase came out a number of years ago on, oh, that's very toxic. And I'd like to explore that with you so you know what it is and how to know the difference. And then we'll really go into the science of happiness and how we can influence with positive psychology and see if we can uncover a formula for happiness. So just briefly, toxic positivity is a cultural force that reinforces if you can believe it, you can achieve it. The only thing in your way is you. The key to success is a positive mindset. If you want to be healthy, you must be positive, or God will never give you more than you can handle. So toxic positivity can leave us feeling alone and disconnected. It can stop us from communicating. It can stifle creativity and change, and it can silence people. It labels things as happiness inducing and happiness preventing. So the darker side of positivity is looking at what it means is when you're forcing optimism. And when you're forcing optimism, it means that you are not accepting that the fact that sometimes life isn't all fantastic. What we want to do is try and change that perspective. And rather than insisting on a positive outlook in every situation, regardless of the circumstances, because these can invalidate genuine feelings. And looking at emotional invalidation, that's where we're dismissing or downplaying negative feelings and maybe offering a very simplistic positive response to it, such as, oh, just stay positive, look on the bright side. And lots of these phrases we may still use because it's quite complicated to know the difference. But there's often, within the darker side of positivity, there's a pressure to be happy all of the time. And some circles may not want you to express your negative emotions because you don't want to express negative emotions because that is against positivity and you should always encourage the positive emotions. And this can lead people to hide their own feelings and make them isolated and disconnected. So they stop talking about it because they don't want to come across as negative. And as a result, they may go into some form of depression and impact their growth. So what we're going to do is look at how do we actually know the difference. Some of these phrases, when we look at them, like just be positive, you could say, well, it's okay to feel like this. So somebody comes and says they're feeling quite down or negative,
And this can happen quite a lot with children. And we try and be positive around them and say, don't worry, just stay positive. I know this is hard, but just stay positive. When actual fact, sometimes it's quite good to acknowledge those feelings and then look for the solution. It could be worse. So I'm here for you. Just don't think about it. It might never happen. Your feelings are valid. So it's more about accepting, what can I do to support you? Now, when I was growing up in Ireland, we have a culture. Everybody says, it'll be grand. Don't worry, it'll be grand. Or, sure, could be worse, as it says there. And also the great one was, don't worry, God only gives you what you can handle. So all of these phrases can be ingrained in us. So when we're trying to bring our children up in the best possible way, some of these phrases do come out. And you're thinking, okay, so what do I do to change these habits? And what are the benefits of positive psychology and staying for positive psychology? So it's kind of looking at both of those sides. So being able to validate and listen and hear somebody's own lived experience, but also having the tools to be able to give them something to overcome some of the anxieties and potential pain they're experiencing. So can positivity and happiness be learned? So can you actually change old habits? Back in 1966, a study from Lichen and Telegram compared well-being samples of twins. So these were a twin study in Minnesota. And they discovered that the stuff that can't be changed, it's up to the genes, can't be changed, accounts to 50% of our happiness. And then 10% is looking at circumstances. So your circumstances could be related to income, social status, environment. And then that leaves 40%, which can be influenced by our attentional activities. But the problem with this study is everybody's lived experience is different. And this is something that in academia and in research is changing quite phenomenally over the last 10, 20 years. People are looking at those individual cases. You can't just blanketly say everybody feels like this or this is what happiness is all about. And remembering that genes can actually be changed. So the more we're learning now, genes can be influenced by our environment. So you may hold a gene for a genetic condition, but if you are not in the environment which might trigger that gene to come out into a disease or something like that, you may never get that. So we need to look at this with a very, very small pinch of salt. And actually, if you kind of look at happiness, it's probably more like this. There's ups and downs, sometimes they're really bright, really high, and it can be all over the place. And that's okay. But what I'd like to do is distill it down even further and look for threads or common themes from other people who are talking about happiness. And I may have spoken about this before, but this is Okinawa. And I'm not sure if anybody's seen it before, but there is a Netflix series documentary about the secrets of the blue zones. The blue zones are the places in the world which have the highest amount of centenaries. So that's the highest amount of people over 100 in the world. So people in the blue zones are living much longer than other people across the world. There used to be one blue zone, which was Okinawa. And then they realized actually there was a lot more of these blue zones. So they went and traveled across these places. So there was Okinawa, Japan, Costa Rica, Greece, California. And they went to these to try and to find the common themes. And they thought it might have been because Japan has really great fish and a different lifestyle, but it wasn't. When they distilled it down, they figured out that it was about movement. So physical, natural movements, keep on moving. A sense of purpose. So they knew what direction they were going to. They had goals, they had purpose and meaning. They were able to manage their stress much more effectively. So they were able to tap into things that helped them with their self-care. They had an 80% eating rule. So they ate until they were only 80% full. And then that helped them with their digestion and helped them with their eating regulations. They were plant stacking. That means they ate more fruit and vegetables than they did eat meat. And when they did introduce meat, it was only 3 to 4 ounces of meat. And that was an average of 5 times a month. So it was very little. A sense of belonging. So they were part of a community. They were engaged in a community. Also, they were in close connection with their loved ones. So most of them were living in the families with their loved ones and with children. So they were very much part of the family unit. And the last connection was the tribe. And this is quite interesting. They had groups of 5 friends, a minimum of 5 friends that they had made a lifelong pact with to engage with and keep active with. It's quite fascinating. So then if you look at positive psychology and thriving, there are a number of different frameworks to distill down what thriving or happiness is all about. And the most famous one is the PERMA. A number of years ago, H was added into it, and that was added in by Michelle McQuaid. But prior to that, it was Martin Seligman's format and framework. And then Mary McLeod came up and created the Beacon model. And when I kind of looked at these, they're all about very similar to the blue zones, but they're all kind of saying the same thing. When I distilled it down further, these were the common threads. So there was a sense of engagement. So doing stuff, having a purpose, compassion, that's self-compassion. So being kind to others, being kind to oneself. Positive emotions, having mechanisms to increase those short-term and longer-term positive emotions. A sense of priorities. So that is knowing what they're doing. So that could be in the form of goals or their purpose within that family. Purpose and meaning. Again, looking at, I know what my place is in society, in this world, and I have value in that. Connection and relationships. So that's very, very close connections and being part of a tribe or a bigger group, and strong relationships, again, where everybody is valued. And health. So that means eating well, exercising, moving, and sleeping. I'd like to ask you, where are you on this happiness scale? Looking at those common themes of positive emotions, engagement, connection, purpose and meaning, compassion, priority and goals, health. If you've got a pen and paper and are happy to write down just for yourself, just these key areas. So positive emotions, engagement, connection, purpose and meaning, compassion to self and others, priorities, goals. So you have a vision, you know where you're aiming for, and health. And you might want to split health up in, are you eating well? Are you exercising or doing some sort of physical activity? It doesn't have to be exercise, it just needs to be movement, natural movement, walking, gardening, something like that. And also then sleep. Are you getting the recommended 7 to 8 hours sleep a night? So you need to grade yourself on this. And I'm happy to share this with you so you can actually even color it in to see where your balance is. And just on a 1 to 10, look at where those gaps might be. Let's give you another second. So 1 obviously meaning really bad. 10, yeah, doing this well. So where are you on this happiness, thriving model? Okay. So hopefully you've got some idea where you are there. So now have a look at where you are scoring least. So which area would you like to focus on? And let's look at one thing you can do, short-term and long-term, to move you closer to a 10 in this area. And what I mean by short-term and long-term. So let's say if we were thinking about positive emotions. So let's say you feel that you're always a bit grumpy all of the time. That used to be one of my key features, grumpy all of the time. So what can I do short-term and longer-term to make me less grumpy? And short-term wise might be surrounding myself with people I really like and moving away from those people that are zapping my energy, those energy vampires. It also might mean leaning into things I really enjoy doing and love. So that might be going for long walks with the dog, or it might be just watching funny cat videos on YouTube. So they're kind of short things, but longer term. And last week we spoke about gratitude. We spoke about gratitude letter and sharing something with someone else and how that benefits us as much as the other person. And these are all much longer term strategies. Longer term strategies include possibly going to the gym or setting yourself a goal to do a half marathon or something like that, if that's your vibe. But what longer term strategies can you put in place? And if you're thinking about the blue zones, what strategies do they have for long term? So if you can think of those things of long term and short term that you can focus on, and we'll hopefully have a chat afterwards and discuss it. I just want to add something in that none of these happiness models have offered. And something that is absolutely key on any of this journey, and that is awareness. Because if we don't have full awareness, it can be really hard to change. It's all very well sharing different strategies and different tools, but if you don't understand how your mind works and your body works and how you communicate, how others perceive your emotions, if you're kind of ignoring your eating habits, it's going to be much harder to change. And awareness means coming out of that automated life that we all have. And this is a natural way everybody lives. We spend between 80 and 95% of our days in the same thought patterns, thinking the same things, doing the same things over and over again. And it's super important that we try and come out of that automated zone. The automated zone is great because you don't want to think every time you go into how to drive the car or to remember things or to do some tasks repetitively. But when it is actually running your life, what you're doing is you're drawing from old downloaded programs. And if you're downloaded programs, so that means the things that you've experienced all through your childhood into your 20s. And that can be religion, your family, your friends, your education, all of that, and experiences. All of that will be running your program. And if some of it wasn't very nice, you don't really want that to be presenting as your lens. So you don't want to be viewing the world through that lens. So that's why we increase our awareness. And this awareness tool is to help you understand what you're thinking. And we think we know what we're thinking. But actually, if you look at some of the statistics, we think about 6,000 strands of thoughts every single day. And if you can catch what you're thinking, you're probably only catching maybe 100 of those thought rounds on a day. So the more we can open our minds to recognizing those thought patterns that we're having, we can start to change them. Same as understanding our strengths. What are our values? What are we really good at? Learning about that. And also our actions. So why do we behave the way we do around certain people? It's because you're being led by your previous downloaded program. So understanding why you are behaving naturally that way and trying to put something in place to disrupt that pattern. Eating, sometimes, and I know I do it, sometimes you grab something maybe for lunch and then you kind of go, did I eat? Which is not great. So it's about understanding, looking at the food you're eating, thinking about the blue zones where they're eating up to 80% full. That takes a lot of awareness. How do you know when you're 80% full? Often in the Western society, we tend to finish our plate. Understand how we're eating, understand, our emotions, how our emotions are triggered, and looking at that toxic positivity and actual positivity. Emotions are very real and they're there to warn us and to help us and to keep us safe. And recognizing that our emotions are fluid, so they have peaks and troughs all of the time. And it doesn't mean it's necessarily real. So if you are feeling an emotion, feeling down, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's something wrong. It just means that is a natural emotion that's coming through, possibly because your automatic thoughts are thinking of something from 30 years ago that happened, but you're completely unaware of it. So you almost have to just go through those cycles of emotions, understand that they're part of your human experience. And as long as they're not regularly disrupting your day or your life, it's okay to have these up and down emotions. And then you can start leaning into those longer term and short term emotions. Communication. How do we talk? How do our children see us? So do they see us as the wise person? Do they see us as the authorian, the strict parent? Do they see us as kind and warm? So our communication patterns are really, really key. Are we mindfully communicating? So that means, are we thinking about how we are speaking to our children, or is it in that automated process? In which case, sometimes the tone might not be the way we intended it to be, but it was a reaction. So again, understanding how we're communicating. And also our body, recognizing the stress levels that we have in our body, what that feels like, and what our body feels like when it's really calm and really rested and really relaxed. What it feels like when you get a big hug from your child when everything's going great. So it's all of these awareness features that I meet so many people that say, I've got good self-awareness. And when you go down into the nitty-gritty, all the little aspects of awareness, it's huge. And I know this is quite a lot. Kind of, oh my gosh, first we were looking at the ways to have positivity and happiness, and that's a lot. And now this small little piece of the beginning, the foundation, this awareness is so huge. But actually you can figure all of this out really quickly. And how I do it is by getting a band, so a hairband or a charity band, and putting it on my wrist and leaving it there for a week. And during that week, every time I have a negative thought or I'm judging somebody or a situation, it could even be judging the weather because it's going to ruin my day or my hair or whatever it is, wear that band. And every time you have a judgment or negative thought, change the band from one wrist to the other. And what you're trying to do with that is you are disrupting the thinking pattern. You're identifying that you're having this thought, how it's affecting you. So I see the rain. How is it affecting me emotionally, physically, all of these things? And then you keep on doing that for the week. And sometimes you won't have moved that band for hours. And that's not because you haven't had a thought or a judgment. It's because you're unaware. And it's a great visual exercise to recognize how much you live in a process of automation. And once you're aware of that, then you can start to change it. So judging what you're eating, do I really want to eat this? Am I thinking this is bad for me? Am I really enjoying this? Is this nourishing me, my body and my soul? And these kind of thoughts that you're having, which you don't really stop and think about, identifying when they happen and where they happen. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense. What I am going to share with you, and I'm not sure if this will work. If it does, great. It's a video. If you were laughing at that, which most people do when they see something funny, notice what it does to your body and how it can change how you're feeling. It's because you're releasing dopamine. It's because you're releasing oxytocin. You're lowering cortisol. You're lowering adrenaline. So something as simple as finding ways to have a good laugh every day is an incredible short-term positivity activity and definitely not toxic. So even when we're feeling really down and we watch something fun and funny, just because we've been taken out of that low mood for a moment doesn't mean we're ignoring it. But what we're doing is giving ourselves the strength to be able to look at that low mood for what it is and sit with it for a while. So that's why we use positive psychology tools and activities to just give us a buffer against some of those daily stresses that come on alongside us. So I hope you've found that interesting. If you want to know more, I do have a membership. I'm not going to go into it. The membership is where we meet a couple of times a week and look at you on your positivity journey and trying to give you that community and many of those things that are in those positivity frameworks. It is a year commitment. There's a QR code there if you want to look for more information on it or book a coffee with me by scanning the QR code. But now I'm going to just open it up to questions and you can share any of your insights with me.